Hi, my name is Dana, and I'm the second negative, and I will be discussing the workability issues and the disadvantages of switching to a flat tax system. To begin with, I have a workability issue being as for compliance. Americans don't want the flat tax. Although my opponent stated how dissatisfied Americans are with the current tax system, there is also no interest in going to a flat tax system. People find that to be even more concerning and feel that the disadvantages are higher. And onto that, I'll have two disadvantages to go with too. But to begin with, Americans don't want the flat tax. Americans don't like or trust radical changes. And and a quote in Understanding Tax Reform, A Guide to the 21st Century Alternatives, written by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants in 2005, they state that both individuals and businesses have made long-term capital allocation decisions based on current and prior income tax incentives. So a great change would affect these decisions for a long time and would undermine all of their planning. Another reason they don't want to change is, and according to, again, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, Flat Taxes and Consumption Taxes, A Guide to the Debate, published in 1995 when there was a major push to go toward flat tax. They say because of its equivalence to subtraction value-added tax, many of the economic effects of flat tax are the same as those of broad-based consumption taxes. My opponent mentioned that it's a progressive tax, but the assumption and the belief of the people is that a flat tax is a regressive tax. Whether that is true or not, that is in the minds of most people who are looking at this issue. And generally, it's assumed that a regressive tax will be passed forward in prices and low-income housing. The loss of deductions will cost taxpayers far too much. My opponent states that it will make it a lot simpler and that it won't affect charitable contributions and so on. But according, again, to A Guide to the Debate from the AICPA in 1995, they note that every deduction, not just charities, and every tax credit allowed under current law would be repealed. In the CQ Researcher article, Tax Reform in 1996, they state that the mortgage interest deduction, which has been part of the tax code since 1913, saves homeowners about $59 billion in taxes annually. Eliminating the mortgage deduction would have raised the 1996 taxes of about 28 million homeowners to would have raised their taxes about $2,100. They also state that eliminating charitable contribution deductions would increase the tax payments of about 30 million households, an average of nearly $600 per return. So possibly they would still be contributing, but probably not as much because they would lose that deductions that they had. My first workability argument is that flat tax will have adverse economic consequences. Business and local governments would be adversely affected. Again, the QC Researcher in March '96, they note that home construction and real estate industries decry plans to eliminate mortgage deductions. By removing this major incentive to buy rather than rent, you would decimate the housing market. And at this point in time, we really don't need anything else to affect our housing market. Also, again, in Understanding Tax Reform by the AICPA, they say that state and local governments would no longer enjoy any competitive advantage up against the corporate bonds. Right now, state and local governments have municipal bonds that are tax exempt. That would no longer be the case under flat tax. The states would not be able to be competitive in getting their bonds sold, and corporations would be just equal. Also in the Guide to the Debate by the AICPA, an important point is that international competition for sales into domestic markets is preserved by the use of border taxes. What this means basically is that imports right now are taxed exactly like domestic products, making them equal to a certain extent. With the flat tax, import taxes would be gone, meaning that domestic products would have a disadvantage up against the import products. Another reason, another economic consequence. And ultimately, taxes would be higher. As my partner stated, there would be a large number, or a relatively large number, that would pay zero taxes. On the low-income side, what also is not mentioned is that people who gain most of their income by dividends from savings and stuff that would no longer be taxed, they would also not pay income tax, because it's only wage earners, as my partner suggested. And removing a substantial number of low-income wage earners, again according to the AICPA, would narrow the tax base and would result in having to have a significantly higher tax. Finally, as my partner stated, we have a theory on the real purpose behind the flat tax, and that is my second disadvantage. The flat tax will undercut the federal government. Main proponents and designers want less government, and this is their way of achieving it. According to Richard Murphy, in an article called Flat Tax, Not as Simple as They Would Have You Think, he's also an accountant as well as an economist. He quoted Professor Joel Simrod of the University of Michigan, who stated you can have a democracy and you can have flat tax, but you can't have both. Richard Murphy went through in this article and looked at the flat tax and determined there were way more ways for wealthy people to get out of paying taxes than there are now. And it would shrink the income of the government, thus making it a smaller government and an exercise in social engineering. So our belief is the proponents would like to undercut the government, and as much as that might sound good, less government, we want a lot of things from our government, so I think we need it. Thank you.